Okay, we'll call to order. Regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Town of Florence. Mr. Harmon, would you take the roll?
Commissioner Prow.
Present.
Commissioner Simmons. Mr. Simmons has contacted staff. He's flying back into town. He may or may not be able to make it tonight. Commissioner Schmidt.
Present.
Vice Chair Frost.
Present.
Chairman Pranzo.
Present. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
Would you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, discussion, approval, disapproval of the minutes of the joint meeting with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting conducted on April 16, 2019. Open it up to the commission. Do we have any comments, gentlemen?
I'd make the motion that we approve the joint minutes of the joint meeting with the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meetings of April 16, 2019.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
So I have a motion by Commissioner Schmidt, second by Commissioner, I still can't say it right, Prue? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Meeting minutes are approved. New business. Presentation and discussion of the Development Code reorganization and schedule.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, this is the next phase of the Development Code review that we started last year based on certain priorities that Council helped us establish. We've gone through the Parking Code, which, by the way, the Council has adopted, and it will be going into effect in about a week. The other one was the Sign Code. There are still a few tweaks that we're working with the Council on in particular. This was one of the areas we also prioritized, and that had to do with the organization, the basic organization of the Development Code itself, to make it a little bit more standardized compared to other development codes, and to allow for future additions to the code. If you've looked at it, you may have noticed that everything in our code is consecutively numbered, so there's no place to plug in anything new. So one of the major goals in this is to fix that, so there's room to actually insert other standards, zoning districts, whatever might be appropriate. Our consultant, Dana Burkhart, is here to introduce you to that and have a discussion.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pranzo, Chairman Pranzo, Commissioner. Larry explained it well. When I started working with the town about 1.5 years ago, the first thing I noticed, your zoning code was only online. I've got a printed copy that a prior planner had given to me, Michelle. But I did notice it appears as though it had been incrementally updated over the years, even though the whole thing was readopted in 2006. But it was somewhat piecemeal, and there's some disjointed areas and so forth. So we'll quickly cover through the scope of this update, and I'll just show you a couple examples, and then ultimately we're introducing the first, the table of contents, which is TOC. You see, so you have a draft of the TOC, which you'll also see at the end of the modules as it will evolve as we get other portions of the modules in the zoning code, development code updated. But then you also have the module 1, which is the procedures and administration of the development code. So why reorganize and clean up the development code? To correct those discrepancies that we find throughout the code, certain areas, and other conflicts that it has internally. We also want to address some statutory changes that have occurred, and I'll touch on that. Just give you a couple examples, and there's one in Module 1. We have no intention to make any regulatory changes. It's simply cleaning this thing up, making it more attractive and more appealing and easier to read and flow, and not give staff some inconsistencies or conflicts that create some difficulty in administering at times. So that leads us to economic, the fact that reorganize it because your zoning ordinance is, and development code is an economic development tool. Someone that's never been to Florence but interested to invest in Florence, or somebody who lives here or owns a business or wants to start a business here, usually they'll start looking at your development code. So if your development code is sophisticated looking, easy to read, and easy to navigate, then that's their first impression of the community, at least with regards to development within the community and those processes that the town has. So we want to organize sections based on the priorities and frequency of use to really make it an easy, usable code. So really quick, I'm going to cover 4 areas of the scope of this reorganization. More user-friendly. Number 1, you can see the existing outline structure. Doesn't really lend well to citing certain sections of the code that might be an issue for an application or a code compliance, a code complaint or something like that. So the alphanumeric nomenclature that's used is not the most, as Larry pointed out, the most flexible to future additions and to describing people where to find something in code. So the proposed structure on the right, we have basically these 6 different series: administration and procedures, definitions, and these will translate directly over, as you see, from the existing code until we get to regulations. And the big difference there, the 300 series, 150.300 that we've noted, use regulations. So we'll separate out the use regulations from the zoning districts, as had begun with the prior administration, when you probably remember a table of uses was adopted at some point. Well, it created a conflict with all these listed uses within your individual zoning districts. And the way it was described to me, this is the most recent list of uses and table that we need to administer. Anything prior to that would be an older, less restrictive, or in conflict with the new structure. So anyway, that's just one element of things that we'll clean up. Subdivision ordinance looks fine. So there won't be any changes. Again, just that nomenclature, so it's easier to reference certain sections of the subdivision code. And then finally, the development impact fees and technical codes are included under section 150 of the development code, section 150. And those development impact fees are more of a fee process, less than a zoning process. So, as well as your technical codes, your building, fire codes, mechanical and plumbing code, all those codes, we like to have those outside of the zoning ordinance so you don't have to go through what's sometimes a more complex or complicated zoning code amendment process to make changes to those documents or those provisions. So you'll see later that basically we pull those out and give them their own areas.
Yeah, if I might interject, that would be very common across the board too in other communities. The way it works typically is that there would be a reference to those development impact fees, to the technical codes, but it would be part of an overall development packet. But the development code would be a separate entity, the impact fees separate entity. The technical codes, meaning the building codes, would be a separate entity. They would be referenced to, and therefore those could be modified without reopening the zoning code itself.
Secondly, we want to correct the conflicts. Some examples, codify the pre-application conference procedure. Town has been operating and providing a pre-application conference as long as I know, probably for the last decade, and most communities do. It's a very useful process to get everybody off on the right foot. Town has an understanding of what somebody might want and be able to really can figure out exactly what the process is. So anyway, we're finally codifying that, which isn't currently in your code, with the exception in your subdivision ordinance actually has a reference to it. And then your zoning districts refer to a pre-application conference, but it's not really explained or codified in any way. So we're doing that. Also, there's redundant design review processes in there, which we'll touch on in the first module. Update terminology to be consistent. That's general. We're going to merge the site plan application with the design review procedure. Again, there's some conflicting processes, and I think that's a consequence of that incremental update over time when we said, we need a design review process, or our council at the time. So staff went and wrote a design review process. Well, there's also already a site plan process And then there's even another one that I'll touch on, like I said, in modules. So we're cleaning all that up and just basically removing a lot of that content and keeping it succinct and keeping what's really practiced today in the development, community development department. Then the table of permitted uses, I kind of mentioned and got ahead of myself there. We'll explain that when we get to it. That's actually in module 2. And then site visibility triangles is a great example. We have 2 different exhibits in the existing zoning code showing 2 different site visibility triangles, a 25-footer and a 33-footer. So things like that have evolved or occurred over time, and we want to make sure we're consistent and don't put staff in that situation, have to explain that to the next developer or applicant. Another portion or rationale for the reorganization is to update the code to reflect changes in statute. HB 2116 is one that's in module 1 that we'll touch on in a minute. But basically, the state made a change in 2017 on how a very complex area of rezoning process is looked at. And I'll touch on that, but it's very rarely will you ever deal with it, but when you do, it's usually a very serious issue because it has to do with a number of people on one side of a rezoning request getting together and forcing a supermajority vote of the council, or your council being 7 members, 6 out of 7 members would have to affirmatively approve that ordinance. So that's how that has such a significant consequence. Anyway, we're making that update. Also, the state's been working hard and still in the process of working on defining group homes. It's created a lot of issues within communities, particularly with the development of sober living homes and the protections that those have gained through ADA and FHA. So the state's been pretty ahead of, and other communities have been well ahead of the state even, saying we need to really make sure we're clear on what types of group homes we're allowing in neighborhoods and so forth. So we'll touch on that. And right now your code's light in the group home area and child care, home-based business area. So that's one area we'll explore. And then finally, ARS 12-1134, which is the claim and diminution in value, the Proposition 207, you probably heard before. There's things we can do in our code to give the town a really good position should someone wish to make a claim in the future. So we'll interject some of that language to help make sure we've got a solid procedure should something like that occur in the future. And then finally, again, no regulatory changes unless absolutely required or somebody's ready to die on the sword. The town is undertaking some pretty significant studies right now for your redevelopment area, as well as I think your general plan is going to go out for redevelopment. So in those processes, the administration or the development of those studies involve a lot of outreach and community visioning. And that's the time to really look at, okay, what's our vision? How does our current code reinforce that vision, or how doesn't it? And that's when you look at substantive changes to your zoning ordinance, which is what we're not trying to do here. We're not doing a community visioning. We're not getting into moving goalposts. We want to keep the goalposts where they are. We just want to make them easier to understand and access. That's it. So the method, as I mentioned, these modules, in bringing the drafts forward, are broken up into 4 different modules. It's a big code, as you know, a lot to try and stay awake in reviewing. So we break it up. Module 1 is what we have placed in your staff reports this evening with draft changes proposed for the table of contents, as well as administration and procedures. And I'll ask you really just focus on the administration and procedures unless you have other areas you want to discuss in the table of contents. Module 2, the zoning districts and use regulations. Those are very similarly related, all our zoning districts. And like I mentioned, currently your zoning districts have a list of uses, a short list of uses, and then the town went and adopted a very broad table list of uses with all the zoning district categories listed across the top, and then all the listed uses along the side, and then which uses are allowed in which districts by right or permitted by right, by conditional use permit, by temporary use permit, or not allowed at all.
Right.
And that's the most modern way to do that. It's a very simple, quick way that anybody interested to do something on their property or know their zoning, or won't know what their use is, and it quickly tells them where they can, or where they can start without a rezoning and just go right in by right to do that operation, or if they need a use permit and so forth. So we'll head that direction and start to clean up and get rid of some of the list of uses. They are kind of archaic as well, so that table seems to be the most modern, up-to-date section for uses in the community. So we'll discuss that, secondly. And then thirdly, Module 3, Development Standards and the Subdivision Code. We'll talk about development standards. That's your lighting. Getting ahead of myself, I'm going to touch on all this in a second, too. Lighting, landscaping, anything you need to do on your site, and any regulations related to what you need to do on your site would all be contained in one area. And then final table of contents, and we'll deal with definitions at the end, because we'll, I'm sure, redefine or develop additional definitions and so forth at the very end of the process.
Just another quick interjection, if I might. If you can go back one slide. For example, under the subdivision code, we're just discovering recently that our subdivision code, while very comprehensive as it relates to our brand new subdivision, ground up, it doesn't really address lot mergers or lot splitting or any of those types of things. And so as recently as this afternoon, having a question on that, we actually had to pick the brain of Pinell County to see how they would allow a lot merger to be processed through planning, assessor and recorder's office for a combination of lots in a recorded subdivision that already exists. And our code doesn't even address it. And so those are the types of things we need to get current, basically.
So there might be a few little modifications to the subdivision.
Well, it's not a minute, it'll be an addition.
Got it noted, yeah.
Won't be a
Or
modification,
just
it'll be an
capturing something that
Yeah.
isn't already captured. Good point. Tentative review timeline. Tonight we're here, obviously, on the 16th, just kicking it off and kind of giving you an update. We want to do the same thing with council. We want to make sure that we don't have a similar situation as the sign code with council and get them hopefully vested up front and have an understanding of this process and what's going on in the community. So as they talk to their constituents, we can help spread that word. We'll also prepare a robust outreach plan and have it in place. We need to continue developing and bring to you to just show you how we are reaching. But we anticipate a lot of a consistent newsletter type of updates with upcoming dates and so forth. Make sure everybody's as aware as it possibly can be in the town's resources to encourage participation.
Great.
And then, so those dates that we have are tentative, and it sounds like they're already going to get pushed. There's some other pressing items from community development that will probably end up pushing these dates back a little bit, which is fine. Time is good. But ultimately, we'll hold a neighborhood meeting and come up with a really good presentation process that we can leave in the community center or someplace and have some really refined meetings. And then have a joint planning and zoning commission and town council meeting after we've gone through all of these initial reviews. That's when we're going to come out and start to really whittle up, okay, here's what it sounded like P&Z would like. And we've had a joint meeting with council, so they're fully understanding and input at that time, and then we'll start that second round of review of, I think this is where we're at. And this is all the feedback we've heard. So that would likely take off, looks like it'll be in November at this point. So, all that said, are there any questions with the process? Before I just hop in and give you some quick tidbits of the Module 1 revisions that you have in your report.
Do we have any comments or questions?
My only question, now I've heard and read that a business coming in or somebody coming into the town, it's rather difficult for them to get everything, the codes and everything else, where it would take months to get stuff approved instead of weeks. By reorganizing all of this, is that in the process to make it easier for the business owner to get set up and running?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Schmidt, We are actually doing that as a separate project right now. We've had what has been commonly referred to as the one-stop shop down in our building on 224 West 20th Street. The implementation of it has been not quite as comprehensive as we had hoped over the, prior to my arrival, and even into part of last year while I was, just getting my feet wet in Florence. However, over the last few months, we've sitting down and taking some very serious, I won't call them reorganizations, but revisions to how we handle potential new projects or adaptive reuse or reuse of vacant lots or vacant buildings, et cetera. We're formalizing processes on a regular basis. We've instituted we noticed in the presentation, they mentioned pre-application meetings. We're formalizing that process as to who is to be invited to each one of those. We have standing Wednesday afternoon pre-app block of time. Everybody on the invite list has that blocked out on their calendars, and as certain types of projects come in where they need a comprehensive review, a preliminary review, of course, those are programmed in on a weekly basis. Right now, we haven't had a vacant slot for some weeks, maybe a couple of months. We are also formalizing another preliminary process. If it's not a real significant project or a major, we're providing courtesy walkthroughs with our fire department and our building official. This is just the schedule between them and the property owner, realtor, whoever might be the appropriate person, walking through an existing structure and giving them, it's not comprehensive, but it's giving them an overview. Certain life safety issues need to be addressed. You may need to have a structural engineer look at certain elements. Where we have one downtown now where there's been some interest in the building, but the ceiling rafter system is exposed and one of the rafter beams is broken. So that's going to have to be structurally repaired. We'll take a little bit more detailed work. We're flagging that for the property owner so they're aware of it ahead of time. This is before they make any application for a building permit or a design review or rezoning or anything else. We're providing that service free of charge. One-stop shop itself, we're formalizing it even more. We have a program called SmartGov, which is a permitting systems program for accepting of plans and projects or proposals or whatever, and they are logged in. We're finding out, even though the town has had this for 8 years maybe, it's only been used to about 20% of its capacity. And so we're getting in-house training. SmartGov, we're on the phone with SmartGov almost daily. Can we do this? Can we do that? And they walk us through it. And our staff is getting up to speed and implementing many, many new aspects of that program that is going to help builder, contractor, property owner, and staff as a way we track projects and get information and log it and being able to keep it in a digital format. And these things hadn't really been done before. I would say in the last 6 months, we've made more progress with some of those elements, that I just described to you than several years prior. And we're very proud of that. And it's helping out a lot. We're getting a lot of compliments. We do have a customer survey up at our front desk where somebody just makes notes, drop them in a lockbox. We'll review them once in a while. You don't put your name on it. We pull them out, review them, and right now we're running at about a 90% positive response. So we are implementing a lot of changes and upgrades to our system apart and separate from this. That being said, making the development code easier to track, more similar to other development codes around the valley or elsewhere, because we have people coming from out of state also, simplifies that process, not only for them, but for us. And that's, the inconsistency is the big issue. I can go to a couple different places in the code and find minor differential standards for the same item. And we've got to get rid of that stuff. So that's what we've been working on internally.
So it's that with what you've already done and in the process of doing with this is all part of the big picture.
It's all part of the big picture.
Thank you.
Which brings us to
this part of town where we're sitting doesn't fall under this code. It falls under the what do they call it? The historic?
That's actually going to be in part item 7A
Good.
for tonight's discussion.
So we're going to go through that while we're going through this as well?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. That is a source of heartburn. You said that you had something more to present?
I did. I was just going to take you through a couple highlights, less than 3 minutes, of the...
I'm not trying to expedite you,
restructuring.
I'm just trying to get the timing of when I should speak.
I was just going to take you through the track changes of Module 1, just the big high-level areas, and this is a notable change.
All right, let's do it and get it over with.
Welcome to the orthodontist. Okay. Okay, so again, I'm going to skip over the table of contents. Like I said, it's going to change over time or slowly morph. You know, and a lot of the stuff I would point out to you is going to be pointed out in Module 1 anyway. So again, this is the administration and procedures. This is kind of our tools and structure with how the Community Development Department operates and their permits and processes, and gives them their authority to administer the zoning code and in which different applications and procedures are required. So pardon if you have a problem with all the track changes and you want a clean version or the Word version to goof with it yourself, just to show, I don't want to see track changes. I want to see what this is going to look like at the end of the day. I got my own copy of the zoning code. We can do that too. So just let me know what's easiest for you to navigate to see what's changing or what's being moved around where. As I mentioned right there, pre-application conference, we struck the site plan application process because it isn't utilized at all. And I don't have any record in the files of it being utilized, so anyway. And like I mentioned, we're morphing provisions of the site plan application process with the design review, which is directly underneath it. And that's kind of how it currently stands today.
You're consolidating it,
Exactly.
okay, because the building official plays a part in that as well.
Well, that explains it. No, I'm joking. Yeah, well, the Technical Advisory Committee, and we're going to touch on that in a minute. But that's your review body,
Right.
your internal staff review bodies, the Technical Advisory Committee, which has been established, it's just not talked about throughout the code. So we're making sure that it is known that that's that formal body's responsibility.
No longer rogue.
You know, I think technical advisory committees is kind of an older thing from subdivision, when subdivision ordinance started, people diverted, but you got to call your internal professionals something, you know, as a group, because otherwise they're the different silos that are coming together in a single meeting. So we call them the TAC, or the Technical Advisory Committee.
That's
and
fine, I have no
believe
problem
in
with
it
it.
like anything, yeah. It's
That's why they're on the payroll.
that's especially why they're on the payroll. Exactly. So then moving along, that was just something minor. Let's see here. 5200. Okay.
Okay, no backtracking.
Sorry. Okay, got it. All right, we'll hop right into the procedures. So non-conforming uses is discussed in another area of the code, but it's more of an administrative interpretive procedure, so we want to bring that up into this administration and procedures area, because that's where you will look, well, is my use no longer a permitted use, or is it, you know, what does legal non-conforming mean, and so forth. So
Yeah, for
moving
example,
along.
that is buried about 2/3 of the way through the code currently.
In a rogue small area along with junk automobiles. So we're going to move junk
Yeah.
automobiles. You know what I'm...
I know, I read that part. That's fun.
That'll go into your parking ordinance, I believe. So am I looking at the
Do you want comments now as we go through or later?
Sure.
Please.
My section?
Mr. Chairman, 150.003. Scroll back up a little bit, I guess. Right there. This chapter shall be in full force and effect from and after July 19, 2006. Is that a historic date?
That's the current historic date.
Okay,
yes.
just wanted to make sure.
And then directly below that, you see the revision dates and the references to revisions that were by law required to contain. So you'll understand when a new code was changed,
Right.
what the substance was. So that's how you can help determine if you're legal nonconforming and at what point that might have occurred.
Very good.
Okay. So there's the Planning and Zoning Commission's establishment, and it's referred to, it's already in the town code, so it's, the reference is there. Historic District Advisory Commission was not referenced in, or is referenced throughout the zoning ordinance, particularly in the historic district, but there wasn't that acknowledgement of that body in the zoning ordinance itself. So legally, you want all that in that single document. When push comes to shove, we want to know that. So we've added them in that reference to where they're located in the town code as well.
I have a question right there where you were just at. In part 5, Roman numeral 5.
Action.
Yeah. Appeals, I'm sorry. Maybe I need to go back up just a little bit.
This is variances in the Board of Adjustment. Variances,
Yeah, go back up to the one above it.
Board of Adjustment,
Yeah, right there.
5, yep.
In there, let's see, in part A, it says appeals may be taken to the Board of Adjustment by persons agreed or by any officer, department, board, or bureau. Does the commission need to be stated in there? Or is it a board?
It's a board.
This is current language in the text of the code. The Board of Adjustment is, but currently in Florence, is the town council. They.
No, I'm talking about us. The planning and zoning. Commission considered a
Yeah, actually,
board.
commission should be listed.
Sure. we could
I
make
mean,
that okay.
because any,
No, there's a separate board. I happen to sit on it.
no, there's a Board of Appeals for things related to the building code, correct. But what this is saying is, certain appeals that can be taken to the Board of Adjustment, this commission could initiate one of those appeals.
Or someone could appeal our decision to the Board of Adjustment, right?
That's correct.
Right.
Right.
Okay,
So it should reference commission also.
In addition to boards. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was.
And then I would, Chairman, Vice Chair, that level of detail, if we could, I'd be happy to. I wasn't intending on getting into this level of detail at this meeting, unless you really want to, but it could be a while. And we are going to have we're going to come back and say, now give us your comments or feedback and walk through it in its own meeting.
So definitely keep
in
all your
about
notes.
month and a half.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
can go
So
either way.
I'm getting in the weeds and you're still at 30,000 feet. And I will go back to 30,000. You're good.
So,
And part of this will also boy, it's still picking me up, isn't it? We're also going to be double checking this back against the state statutes in every case too, just to make sure that we're covered on those types of things, because state statutes, when it comes to Board of Adjustments, hearing officers, zoning administrators, is very specific in some of their definitions and procedures. And we want to make sure that we're current, because even with the adoption of this code, it's already 13 years old.
so again, if you, Chairman, Vice Chair, Commissioners, I'd just go through and I was going to identify some of those big areas that are kind of changing, but again, non-substantive, and why, and then let you run, have fun over the next month, and wait for the next module to come out and talk about this module.
Okay.
When we would introduce that at the next meeting, you see me, ideally. We would cover the review of this Module 1 that you received, and then I'll just do the same thing to introduce Module 2 to you. Give you some quick highlights, this is what you're going to look at, or this is things I'd note for you, and then you'll have that following month to review and dig in and meet with staff if you wish, fire up emails and talk about things,
So you're
but that's the procedure.
not fire off emails between each other.
between staff.
So your plan is, what you've introduced, we'll have time now, 4 weeks, a month, to get into the minutia, so that at the next meeting, we'll bring the minutia forward. At the same time, you are introducing Module 2. Is that the game plan?
Exactly. So we're here on 620, introducing the whole process, and module, 516, and module 1. Module 2 will come out, and I'll introduce it after we get done talking about module 1 at the 6:20 p.m. meeting. So it might not be on 6:20. So each meeting will start the meeting with covering the module you received the last time, to go through your comments and and questions that you might have on that, and then you'll have received the next module to review for that following month. I'll just take you through a quick highlight just to explain staff's rationale of any big stuff, big changes or anything that happen.
And we just want to reinforce, this is a tentative schedule, and you'll understand that in more detail when we get to item 7B.
That's fine, I don't care about that. I just want the process to have some framework for us. You know what you're doing. We're kind of guessing. All right. To get back to something else,
Okay.
one of the problems I've had over the years that I've participated as a commissioner, even though it's on the website, is knowing whether a part of the code that I'm looking at is the latest. You know, I have a tendency to print a section of the code out, put it in a loose leaf binder, because I hate looking at a computer screen. A suggestion, and you may find it antiquated or a better way to do it, but one of the techniques we used in industry was to have a list of effective pages. In other words, you have all the pages numbered, okay, but you also have a revision number and the date it was revised on each page, so that if you want to revise something, you don't have to print the whole damn thing. Just change those couple of pages and distribute the revisions to people who are responsible for using it. They call it a list of effective pages, but it works well because now you've got something to check against to make sure you're using the latest part of the code. I have been caught where I'm using antiquated language. So,
Chairman, is that for this process, the amendment process and proposed changes, or are you referring to the actual online code?
I
And
think
is
it would work
current?
well for this amendment process as you're changing pages. I mean, they're going to change a couple of times, what rev level you're on. But when we're all done and it gets adopted, the whole thing goes to Rev 1 and the date. And then as time goes on, if the ordinance or the code changes, change those couple of pages, increase the rev level and date, and show that on the list of effective pages, so that we know we're constantly working with the latest revisions adopted by council.
Or with just
I think
commission?
I follow that. Dana and I can talk about that offline.
Yeah,
Yeah,
We will.
it's a process right now that a lot of municipal codes use when it, for the hard copies. And
Right.
whenever there's a republication or anything like that, they do the insert page thing, and it's basically the same thing.
We'll add the version to the bottom of each page, date and revision. Now, keep in mind, because this code has to show all the changes that we're going to make from the existing code. So even though we make changes, say, we don't like what you just did, Dana, delete that and leave it. Then that'll be removed. We still have to show all the track changes as it occurs. We can't accept changes at any point and then go back and make more changes. We have to show all, so we'll work through it and get to what's
Yeah, I'm not-
easiest for
I'm
you
not-
to understand.
yeah, I'm not trying to make you nuts or chase your tail. It's just a way to stay current as we move through this process.
And I think a lot of this, too, is not only that, but when we have a finished product,
Yes.
try to institute a method of tracking future changes without having, to reinvent the wheel each time.
Well, we're guessing.
Yeah.
I can look at a page and you can tell me the last time you revised it, but I don't know if it's the latest
Well,
one.
that's what I mean. There would be some type of a separate index
Right.
that would go with the code when we're done,
Which most-
that would note then in 2021, section thus and such was modified at this date, and that way you'd know that was a new page.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's
And
where I'm
most
going.
communities do that too. We'll
Yeah.
have that up front. We'll check with Lisa if she has anything. Here, for this example, I've already inserted the revision date, the ordinance and revision placeholder, but you can see the two prior revisions.
Yeah,
And
this
that's
is
after
a
it's
work on
adopted,
progress.
too.
I'm not trying to make you nuts. Just as you get to presentation, we should know where we are. Because next month, you're going to present Mod 2,
Right.
and we're going to talk about Mod 1. So a lot of work that's already been done may or may not get some changes. So we need a way to track them where we're going.
Got it. And then right now, my comments, are they not being shown right here for some reason? Oh, yeah, they are. So you'll also see the dates that these comments are made and changed. So when we do comment, when you give me a comment, I'll note the revision came from whomever requested it, so I can track all of from what you're saying. So we understand the
All right.
evolution of the language and where it came from and when it was
All right.
amended.
If a comment is worth working with, then work with it. It really doesn't matter who the author is. I mean, we're creating more work than we need to. If Mr. Frost makes a comment and the comment is valid and we see it, that's a change that needs to be made, make the change. Make the comment that it has been changed and why. But you don't have to go through dates and, you understand where I'm going with this? Don't make it harder than it has to be. Just, you've got a great thing going here with these balloons that show what's been changed and why it's been changed or where it's going to be moved and that sort of thing. Don't make it harder than that. It's just that when I get a printed copy, which is what I work with, okay, because I'm not always strapped to a desk, when I have the chance to read it, I read it, and it would be good if I know that what I'm reading is the latest edition.
Yep. And we'll have that. We'll make sure they're all
Case in
version.
point, a week ago, we got the agenda and this package, and what was it, the day before yesterday or yesterday?
Yeah, I messed up.
Well, yeah, but I'm not trying to make,
No, but that actually was an error. I meant only to send you the change in the staff report, and it didn't dawn on me that the whole thing was attached to that, so.
yeah. But
So that was just an error on our part. and-
my point is, there I am. What am I supposed to read?
Yeah.
And should I be comparing these? So you get it?
Right.
Let's not belabor the point. This horse has been beat to death. I think you got it.
Okay, so here we are at Technical Advisory Committee, right here. So it establishes this group, this body of our silos within the town. And then all of a sudden it gets into, oh, well, there's a planning commission review of this something. It doesn't explain that. So what it's doing is saying, oh, this is leading to a design review process. Well, we got rid of that because we have a design review process. So that's why you see that language struck. And then right underneath that was the site plan application process that we don't use.
All right.
So that's where we parsed that, and we'll move on, but we inserted the pre-application conference procedure that we have. And those balloons will explain that. And then here we go. So that's the pre-application conference. So that language is new. That's a new process. Have, fun. If you think anything else, we're trying to go with pre-application, trying to keep it as informal and loose as possible to make it as easy as possible for somebody to come in and give us something to look at and help them accomplish their mission. Again, so here's that site plan review language. The green stuff is pulled out and moved down to the design, merged with the design review right here. And there you go, you see a lot of, and really it's site plan review requirements to submit. So we just kind of, and the design review process was light in that area, so it kind of worked out well. Between the two of them, it's a decent code. Well, and it captures everything we need. So, and I've got all that labeled for you to take a look at. And then We did also add one thing that's been hanging out there that was never included, and I should just note, and I didn't put a note on here for you, but standard plans for production buildings come in. We want a new model or a new standard plan approved. Well, nothing in our code and processes even talks about how that's done. And what it is, what a community's goal usually is, their standard plans. The idea is to make this as easy as possible. Once the plan is reviewed and approved, now the builder can just submit a one-sheet plot plan and go build that same house, right? So anyway, there is a design review. There should be a design review process for that because they have we've got a PUD that kind of explains character and style, and then we have our own requirements. So we did insert that. Standard plans need a design review, and it'd be an administrative approval as well. So just letting you know that's why that is a change or an addition.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, and you're talking about the first time it comes in, it gets a review.
The standard plan, yes.
Okay, so
The
now
detailed
my
plan.
other question on that was when they submit their plot plan, is someone from PN Planning Group looking to elevation so we don't have two elevations side by side?
If that's
that type of thing?
restricted, depending on the community. We're not that advanced, though I don't know all the details of the PUD, approved PUD, and what says which lots can go where. Most of
Okay, so that's not town code, that's a PUD then?
that which would
Typically.
be the town code. because
Yeah,
it's
some
adopted
communities
zoning.
actually have that in the code, and it's basically that the same elevation floor plan cannot be adjacent to on either side or across the street for 3 units. And we generally could watch out for that, but it's not definitive.
So do we want to, if we're talking generalities, do we want to throw that into this as well?
Again, now we're
Yeah, now you're,
moving the goalposts.
that's more, you get into more detail than we had hoped to get into tonight, but you've said it, so we'll make a note and
I was
look at
trying to
that.
stay at 30,000.
Yeah.
I'm sure Pulte will come on in and be a part of that conversation with us. Okay. Moving on, and I'm glad little thing, that's one of the few actual insertions or change that it was made, and that's a very limit. They were already doing that. We were already asking them to submit for review anyway. So HB 2116, there's the revision. It's a very simple revision, but it is a revision. It has a pretty profound impact on protest to zoning requests. Anyway, it actually works more in the rezoning applicant's favor for the most part. That's it. And then I think that's the majority of the substance. Other than that, you see the nomenclature's changing. It doesn't work as well for this initial section, but once you get into those detailed the site development standards, where we have several levels of outline structure, where provisions have extra, subsections, that's when you really see this type of format work well, and it helps staff to reference codes accurately. And that is it.
Okay.
And there's the insertion of the enlargement building and land. We just brought that up from other rogue area of regulations in the current zoning ordinance. And then the citizen review process. We did a little bit of restructuring, make sure citizen review process was included before application and fees and so forth. Because it is one of the more of that administrative procedural necessity prior to getting to the application itself. So that's the bulk of it.
Great. So this is going to be introduced to council
In the near future.
running tandem with what we're doing?
It'll be introduced to council as something that the planning commission is working on. They will get the basic information, but you will be going through your meat and potatoes review, to make your recommendation to council. But, and we're learning as we go on what the council, how deep they want to be involved with certain things at the front end of it. But, we want to introduce them to this just like we introduced them to the overall prioritization of the different parts of the code amendment that we did with them last year. Till they're aware of what you're working on, basically.
Okay, so we've had an overview, modular 1, mod 1, whatever you want to call it. Next month, we'll have had time to review this, make comments. Next month, will we receive a written, in other words, all the red lines gone, a written document of Mod 1 where we've pretty much think we've finished work?
At some point, you may not get it done in a month or so. I mean, we're going to take the time it takes to do it.
All right.
Just
I'm
kind of
not
like
trying to create a square schedule. I'm trying to create a system that we're going to go through. So next month, we talk about what's been given to us today, okay? We make our comments. The next, or whenever it's available, then I'd like to see no
finished.
red lines
Right.
written so that we can go through it in an organized manner rather than all this red line. It's pretty tough to follow that.
No, you're talking basically to come back before we move on too far with a clean copy.
You got it. Said well. Thank you.
And that makes sense, and that'd be their intent.
Okay. And I'd like to do that for each module. So this way, when we get to the end, we have a full understanding of what's in there. It goes to council. It's easy for them to read. Then we've hit a home run.
And Chairman, that's to my first point, depending on what's easiest for you. Like I said, when we advertise this amendment for a public hearing, we have to show that mess of track changes, because that's how somebody
Fine,
knows
knock
what changed.
yourself out, but
for you,
eventually.
and the rest of it, we'll give you both. We'll give you the marked up version and a clean version,
Fine.
because that's what, I think that's what you're asking for. So.
I sure am.
Okay.
Eventually, there
a lot
needs
easier
to be
to
a
read.
clean version, and it can't be after council adopts it. Okay. Mr. Burkhardt, are we done? Thank you, sir, for your patience.
That was the longest 3 minutes, though.
Can't wait till the next one.
Mr. Chairman.
I don't know, he's standing there at the,
Well, I'm going to go to the next item when you introduce it.
okay, then, you want me to open up public hearing?
Oh, there are none.
Yes, I know that.
Okay.
That's why I was wondering why you were standing there.
To do 7A.
Oh, okay, so we're in presentations, the redevelopment plan update and planning and zoning commission role. Now, that's an interesting one. What is our role?
There's been a lot of activity in various levels right now going on within the town as far as master plans and studies are concerned. You've been involved with the active transportation master plan, for example, the pedestrian bicycle path system. A Parks and Recreation master plan is currently underway throughout the town. We're coming up on the general plan update. Our current general plan expires next year. And by statute, it has to be updated, although there's no penalty if you don't. However, last legislative session, last year, they in their infinite wisdom, our state legislators did pass a requirement for updating your redevelopment plan every 10 years also, this time with a penalty. If you don't have it updated within 2 years of its date, timing, it becomes null and void, and you have to start your whole redevelopment plan process over again. So we've actually initiated that. A contract has been let to a consultant team to update it based on state statutory requirements. This is one piece of a much larger puzzle that I'll put together kind of at the end of this. The current plan we have is actually also an update. It was adopted in 2009. The legislation requires it must be updated every 10 years or become null and void. The current redevelopment plan reads like almost like a general plan. It's actually a fairly massive document for what the intent of the statute is. It's hard to follow. It's hard to follow for staff. It's hard to follow, or even harder to follow for the public. The statistical information in it is obsolete. Obviously, 10 years old. Lots have changed in this community in the last 10 years. There are very limited redevelopment strategies or implementation strategies. There's a lot of fluff, in my estimation, and it reads more like a specific plan would read, based again on the way the statutes are worded.
Well,
Currently,
if you turn the clock back 10 years,
Yeah.
we were in our infancy in creating a planning and building official department.
correct.
We're just finally starting to see some daylight around 2009, so.
And that was just about the time that the market crashed too. which
Exactly.
Didn't help.
Yeah.
Currently, looking at basically at the existing town limits, and what they're calling out of, this is out of the existing plan, by the way. The dark area in the center is the redevelopment area as it now stands. To look at it around downtown, we're sitting right here at Town Hall. This is part of the North End Framework Study. This takes you down Main Street, all the way down to the intersection with 287. This was what was defined and adopted as the central business district and therefore qualified as a redevelopment plan area. We are not recommending changing that because the redevelopment plan was so underutilized in this area. To try to expand that at this point might be counterproductive, number one. Number two, it takes a action of declaring properties slum and blight in order to qualify as a redevelopment plan. And, property owners, primarily residential property owners, get a little upset at having their property referred to that way. So the majority of the properties that we're looking at in here along Main Street especially are commercial properties, business properties, and things of that nature that could benefit from a redevelopment plan, again, based on statutory requirements. This is how it lays out right now. Again, North End Framework. This is the historic, what we call the historic core. The majority of the historic district is within the redevelopment plan area. And then what was referred to at that time, I keep losing my cursor, what was referred to at that time as, now does that show on your screen? That doesn't, does it? I'll go back to the cursor. The South Gateway, or what they're calling entry to the town. Related to that, just interestingly enough, the council is now discussing ADOT's alternatives for improving this intersection right down here. Did you watch that on the council the other night?
No, but that's been going on.
Yeah, I know.
Ever.
Well, they actually have now laid out the alternatives. They were presented to council at their last meeting. And so we're moving forward on that. ADOT has programmed this for construction, I believe, in 2021.
Well, it belongs to
So,
What is it?
pardon me?
What is it?
What's the plan?
What's the plan? Is it a roundabout?
Yeah, they're roundabouts.
Oh, they love those things anymore, yeah.
Everybody has an opinion on those. I won't voice mine.
I won't either.
The intent, maintain current boundaries, simplify this thing for public use. It's 160 pages long. I've written redevelopment plans in 12 pages. Now, it's for a much smaller area, but nonetheless, there's only a certain amount of information that is required to be in one, and so we're moving with the consultant team to do not a minimum requirement, but a practical redevelopment plan. We want meaningful redevelopment incentives. We want to obviously adhere to the state statutes, and the goals need to be realistic, and the goals, objectives, policy need to be realistic and implementable before we're done. Achievable. Compact, concise, limit the extraneous data, what I consider fluff. If we want to have any of that, let's put it in an appendix, get it out of the primary plan so that if somebody wants to read the plan, they can do so without having dedicating 4 days of their life. The team that moved forward actually was awarded the contract, is commonly referred to as Planet. This is a state planning consortium. Its a primary principal is Leslie Dornfeld, and she has put together award-winning planning documents around the state for many years. Most recently, Queen Creek was awarded the best general plan in the state last year at the Arizona Planning Association, and she was the lead consultant on that. The rest of the team includes AECOM, a planning engineering, land use economist, Motley Design is historic preservation emphasis. WSP is land use and urban design. And then Grady Gamage, we are requiring that the consultant team provide preliminary legal review of the document prior to our legal review going over it. And they've had a pretty good scope and budget and timeline that goes with that. So how does this fit into the scheme of things? The redevelopment plan update, the Parks and Rec comprehensive plan, the regional transportation plan, which is also underway, the active transportation plan, those are all underway. These are all going to be rolled into individual elements of the general plan update, which we'll be releasing probably June out for proposals. The council has established a budget for it in last fiscal year's, or this current fiscal year's budget. Some of that monies will be reinstated for next year's because it won't be under contract till then. A request for qualifications is going to be released shortly for what will be the 2030 general plan. All these elements tie into that. Also, that complements all of this going on, keeping in mind that Mari and I are handling all these right now. It is getting a little busy. We have also reevaluated our code compliance efforts and are expending those now down around the downtown and Main Street. Those have been upped appreciably. Our code compliance officer, as recently as today, put out 15 notices of violation around Old Town Florence. We're getting very active.
What kind of violations?
Well, right now, he's going after the weeds and debris stuff. However, we've also implemented a Main Street, I don't know what you want to call it, program, where we're working with the fire department on picking out the most critical buildings as we see them around downtown, where they're abandoned, roofs are caving in, things like that, and we're going after the property owners to do something.
About time.
We're actually, I can't give the addresses right now because it's still in negotiations, but the town may end up owning some of them as a result of this program. The other thing that's being worked on that's all part of this big whole is hopefully we can make this work, a vacant building registry. Which will require vacant buildings to be registered through the town, and in such a way that they will be inspected by fire, establish their, what's the word I'm looking for, the liability concerns, how they affect adjacent properties. You know, we have so many vacant buildings, we have a couple of roofs are caving in. Well, that breeds vermin. We have mold issues going on, and that's going to start dominoing on buildings that are habited or are businesses in. So way other communities have done that. There's over 1,000 of these nationwide right now.
Good.
The registries. And the way they do it is there's an annual registration fee, and it goes up each year. And we're not talking $100. We're talking, I've seen initial first year registration from $250 to $1,500. Second year registration goes up by 1,000. Third year registration goes up by another 1,000. So people who are sitting on these properties, doing nothing with them and using as a tax write-off, now are going to have kind of what I consider a reverse incentive to, okay, you better do something with them. You know, get them on the market, clean them up, stabilize them, or we will be in a position to become more proactive on doing it for you and leaning the property. And so we're working on that with our legal department right now and trying to get that moved forward. So all of these things are kind of all going together, and the redevelopment plan is a primary tool for that. It allows for certain types of financing. It allows the town to acquire property. It allows for the government property lease excise tax waivers and considerations and other types of financial. I'm sorry? Incentives. That's one's commonly referred to as GIPLET, and different communities have used it in different ways, but the bottom line is it allows us to own property and lease it out, and there are tax advantages for whoever the lessees are, things of that. Anyway, all of this is one big package. But as far as your role with the redevelopment plan, you and our Historic District Advisory Commission, HDAC, are going to be the two primary bodies that will review this, that will be recommending bodies to the town council for the ultimate adoption of the plan. We'll be coming out with a very comprehensive public and citizen participation. There'll be things on the website, on the Facebook blasts, things of that nature. Our structure is already set up for that through our assistant to the town manager, Ben Bitter. And so there's going to be, public meetings. We're actually walking the whole entire property the entire area on June 6th with the consultant team to start on the ground inventory and just kind of getting existing conditions. We're going to do this pretty comprehensively. And again, it's going to be a specific area of the general plan when that general plan update comes out.
Good.
Any questions?
No, you're pretty well covered. Do you want to move on to future agenda?
Sure.
If there's no comments from the commission?
Put this away. Since I'm up here, I'll just stay here. All of a sudden, I'm not sure what prompted it, but I'm not going to complain. We have 3 public hearings pending for rezonings, 2 of which have been in the works for quite a while, one for Florence Gardens, one for Caliente, to help them with some of the issues they've had out there. The only reason you haven't seen it before this is we've been waiting for their boards and their members to approve it first. Before we bring it forward in the form of a code amendment, you'll be getting both of those tentatively right now for June 20th. We have a rezoning request just for a property that is just south of the future roundabout interchange on the west side of 79 to bring a property more in concurrence with the general plan. And it's going from residential to a business zone, should it be approved through you and the council. We have infill incentive district project coming up. We have found a property that's a historic property, actually, that's been on the market for quite some time. And in the process of doing all of the title search, et cetera, it has been discovered that the structure itself is 8 feet into the adjoining property. And luckily, we have our core district infill incentive, and allows us to do certain property line adjustments. And in this case, it'll change it'll vary from the code requirement for that particular zone. But the way that the district is worded, we can do that without going through a massive variance process. It allows the flexibility to adjust lot lines to better suit the fabric of that particular area, and that'll become obvious when we write that up and get that to you. Those are all 3, or the 3 rezonings. We're looking at the 20th. The infill, if I can get it together in time, you'll see that on June 6th. And then it goes to, all of these will end up ultimately going in front of the council. And then, as Mr. Burkhardt has introduced tonight, you're going to be having an ongoing presence as it relates to the development code update. So those are the basics right now. I can't think of any more. It's not that we don't have other things to do on that list too, but they won't be coming in front of the commission necessarily.
Mr. Chairman?
Please.
And I'm going out on a limb, but I'm assuming that the first meeting in July is canceled?
I'm not going to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we established, for public dissemination, I can send it to you also, basically reinforce your calendar for the year, and that was one that kind of got shined on since it is July 4th. I'm going to be in Utah setting off fireworks up there.
Good.
But, yeah.
Okay, so does that wrap it up?
It does, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Call to the public, commission response. We have no public. Moving on, call to the commission, current events only, gentlemen.
Nothing here.
Please.
I was pleased to hear that you're taking some active interest in the weed situation. The corridor down 79 in particular is really bad right now. In a lot in front of those businesses, it's just kind of the main pathway for people visiting our community. So I encourage what you've done there or doing there.
Mr. Allen's having fun. Any other current events?
Nothing here.
Okay, then we will move on. I need a,
Make the motion to adjourn.
that's what I'm hoping for. Did I get a second?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to adjourn from Commissioner Frost and second by Commissioner Smith. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.